Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price. Listening to the sounds of the Motor City madman himself, Ted Nugent. And I bet he's mad now more than ever, the Michigander, one of many who sit there and look with disgust at what has happened to the city of Detroit. I remember leaving Detroit in 1975 as a young teenager, and the joke was then, well, whoever was the last person to leave, please turn out the light. Here we are several decades later, and that light seems to be about to go out. However, we got a guest here today who says that doesn't have to be the case, that if businesses can turn around, which is what he spends a lot of time doing, is helping businesses do just that, entire cities can turn around. Sandy Steinman is our guest. He is the author of the Small Business Turnaround Guide. You can learn more about the guide and Sandy at businessturnaroundguide.com. Sandy, welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Good. Real quickly, kind of tell us your elevator speech.
Well, I'm just a lucky guy who gets to do, exactly what he loves to do. I've just spent years fixing companies. I've owned a number of companies, found there was a better way to do things, worked for a large consulting company, billed out at about $400 an hour for small businesses, and said, there's got to be a less expensive way to do it. Started my own, and I've just been blessed. Really added millions of dollars of profitability. I've had the best clients you can have, and decided to write a book about it. It's been really well received, the Small Business Turnaround Guide, and I've got to decide what I'm going to do next. But it's been a blast. I have a great life.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your suggestions. You say there's a 9-point plan to help turn Detroit around. Well, I'm dying to hear it. We need to get that out there.
Kevin, I don't think it's rocket science. I mean, here's the first thing: is when I go to visit a client, the very first thing I do is I do what's called a physical examination, just like a doctor would do. And it really involves kind of peeling back all the layers of the onions and seeing what's there. Well, here's what you'd find in Detroit. You find a city that's gone from 1.8 million in population to just over 700. They're struggling to stay over 700,000. Think about that. Mm-hmm. It's 25% down in the last 10 years. Michigan has lost 48% of its manufacturing jobs from 2000 to 2010. Mm-hmm. Detroit
so basically the thing is imploding. The city of Detroit is imploding, and really much of Michigan, although the state seems to be in pretty good hands these days with the current government. The government
the state's much better, but it's got a danger because Detroit has been paying their 10,000-person payroll with bonds that are backed by the state. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem. But just finish the physical. Because the real problem is Detroit's been operating as its business as usual. A third of the homes in Detroit are vacant or derelict. 18% unemployment. 60% of Detroit's children live in poverty. 50% of the population is functionally illiterate. Mm-hmm. So you got a very broken...
Yeah, you're more likely to go to prison than you are to graduate from high school in Detroit.
Absolutely. I mean, isn't that a terrible thing?
Unbelievable. Yet the average teacher makes more than virtually any teacher in any other city in the country.
Called hazardous duty pay.
Yeah, hazardous duty pay, yeah.
And
they also get issued bulletproof vests. So,
exactly. And by the way, if you want to make an investment in homes, the average home sells for $9,000 in Detroit today. So I mean, it's a disaster. And so it's got to be like any other entity, whether it's a company or whether it's a government. First thing is, you got to stop the bleeding. They've got to look at themselves. They got to say, okay, no deficit spending, no borrowing money, which means they got to figure out how much tax revenue they've got coming in. And I'm sure it's not a lot given their situation. But you know what? They cannot spend more than that. So that means they're going to have to cut a substantial number of the 10,000 employees. And the 10,000 employees, by the way, to give you an example, Austin, Texas has 800,000 employees. Has 12,000 employees. Their population is about 850,000 people. Mm-hmm. So that is about 70 one employee for every 70 citizens.
Right.
Detroit, and Austin is a thriving town. Detroit has the same one employee for every 70 citizens, even though it's broken so bad.
Yeah, and apparently most of those employees are in the wrong place because the average wait time for a 911 response is 1 hour.
Oh, absolutely.
And 70% of all murders in Detroit are unsolved. So if you want to kill somebody, go on a vacation in Detroit with that person.
Absolutely right.
You gotta laugh. You gotta laugh, my friend, or you're gonna cry. That's all I can say.
Well, that's exactly right. You might be. I'm trying to think. It seems to me I read that. Let's see. Justifiable homicide has something like doubled over the last 3 years.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than
crime
that.
Capital of the world.
And we're talking about a place that's really soft on criminals, but they're realizing that people are going to have to police themselves.
Well, they are. So, at any rate, so go back to doing it. So you've got to cut the workforce immediately. Keep the most productive employees, which means to do that, and to do my next point, you've got to break the union hold on the city. And the feds are going to have a problem with that. But the good news is, the bankruptcy court judges have a lot of power, and they can do this. And I'm hoping they get a judge that is going to break the union's hold on the city, because in addition to drastically cutting the people, they need to look people in the eye and say, look, I know you've got pensions and benefits, but we can't afford to pay this much. Here's all we can pay because it's in line with our tax revenue. Got to do that. If they don't do that, they won't recover.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that happens is I've seen companies go through bankruptcy, and really when companies are in the process of going through bankruptcies, they, things are really looking good because they have a lot of money. They build up a little treasure chest because they don't have to pay their bills. But then when they go back to regular business, they go back to business as normal, and they get back in trouble again.
Yeah.
So they can't do that. It'd be terrible. So they've got to cut pension, retirement benefits. Very unpopular, but there's no other way to do it. And the bondholders obviously have got to take a major haircut, which means the state's going to have problems.
Yeah, a lot of problems, and there's and we'll talk about this after the break, and we're fixing to have to take a break, Sandy.
Sure.
But we'll talk a little bit about the fact that the reality is that because of the Constitution of the state of Michigan and contractual obligations based on that, there's a chance that Detroit may not even be able to declare bankruptcy. That's been part of the narrative I'm hearing as well. But
I am too, and I'm hoping it's wrong.
Yeah, they have to do something. They absolutely have to do something. Of course, I'm afraid that this is going to have a domino effect. Think about Camden, New Jersey, East St. Louis. There's just a list of cities that were like, oh, really? We can declare bankruptcy? Oh, really?
Well,
and all those people out there, all those senior citizens who invested in munis because they thought that was going to be a guarantee that they'd always get paid on that. They're going to be rethinking investment as well. So, Sandy, we got a lot more to talk about, which we will right after this break. Sandy Steinman, he is with, he's a turnaround king is what he does, a small business turnaround guide. Learn more about that at businessturnAroundguide.com. More after this.